Patch 8.0.0.1, aka the Final Shape patch, introduced quite a lot of buffs and adjustments to exotic weapons, and I wanted to explore them to see if they're worth using in the current PvE sandbox. Most of my testing took place in legendary campaign missions and expert battleground echoes, kind of mid-range content, as most things in anything lower than that difficulty are pretty much globally good, or at the very least usable, so, you know, it's kind of tough to test and that kind of stuff. We're going to start with two weapons that got catalysts in Final Warning and Tessellation. Final Warning's catalyst makes your shots hit harder, about 30% against marked targets, and has a pretty good chance of refunding ammo to the magazine on hit, so it lets you chain your shots a lot better and easier and longer. Final Warning is a sidearm that can lock onto targets and has different functions depending on if you hip fire or aim down sights. Holding down the trigger allows you to lock onto targets. Hip fire gives tracking on those shots and increases body shot damage, while aiming down sights gives them more velocity and higher crit damage. It's a 2-for-1 style weapon used for ad clear or single target. This is a weapon that I didn't really discuss when it first came out with Lightfall, but it did get a little bit of buzz when Onslaught came out with Into the Light. I personally thought it wasn't good enough to keep in your loadout past round 30 or so, but I know some people enjoyed it. My slight gripe with the weapon is that I feel like in the time that it takes to charge up a shot, I could have just killed the enemies normally, but the more difficult the content gets, the more valuable I feel like this effect does become. However, once I kept a closer eye on the meter that fills up in my weapon buff section, I started to enjoy the experience a bit more because my shots would come out a lot faster. You don't need to hold and wait for the game to shoot for you. You can just fire as soon as that meter is full. The unraveling is pretty nice too for any sort of stragglers that might be running around. Hi, I'm literally a dog here to tell you about today's sponsor, Rocket Money. As a dog, I don't have very easy access to money or employment, so the little that I do have, I need to watch pretty closely. Thankfully, Rocket Money is here to help. They're a personal finance app that helps me manage my money by doing stuff like helping cancel unwanted or forgotten subscriptions, like my subscription to Worldwide Treats. Sorry, but they're just a bit gamey, and if I see a fourth box show up to my house because I forgot to cancel, I will probably eat them anyway. They can even help lower my bills, which would be cool if I actually paid any. But I know my roommates could probably use that function, so good for them. So if you want to keep your money, go to rocketmoney.com/brimstone, rocketmoney.com/Datto, or click the link in the description to get started for free. That's rocketmoney.com/Datto to get started for free. Thanks very much to Rocket Money for sponsoring this video, and thanks to my roommates for all the carrots. Now, if you're already a fan of this weapon, there's no reason to not grind out the catalyst. You're just going to be dealing more damage. You're going to be shooting more shots. Not really a whole lot else to say unless I want to review the exotic completely here, which I don't. Do I think the catalyst is enough to move the needle on this exotic when it comes to the greater PvE landscape? I don't necessarily think so, but that's mainly because, one, it's a sidearm and most people aren't super comfortable with traditional sidearms, and number two, it has a pretty unique firing mechanism, and I think this would have to be one of the best weapons in the game for the average person to tolerate using this weapon. I don't think it's a bad weapon. I actually think it has a decent amount going for it, but traditional sidearms are inherently riskier to use than the average weapon, and when something like Kvostov is doing what it's doing, I think you really gotta like this thing in order to use it. The Catalyst review is just, yeah, it's good. Tessellation is the pre-order weapon for Final Shape. Now it's just available, I guess, and it too got a catalyst. This is another weapon that I didn't really review too aggressively because I didn't think it was going to create any new metas or anything like that, and it turns out I was right. This is a fusion rifle that matches the energy of your equipped grenade, and where you can consume your grenade to fire off a big damage shot from the weapon. It also has built-in Demolitionist, so you can get your grenades back relatively quickly. The Catalyst now applies an elemental debuff based on the damage of the shot, so Arc Blind, Solar Scorch, Void Weaken, Stasis Slow, and Strand Sever. Does the Catalyst really push this weapon further in the sandbox? I don't think so. It just adds some extra utility to the weapon. Blind's kind of nice, Weaken's not so bad, Sever's not bad. It's just a nice bonus, but if you weren't using Tessellation before, I don't really see you using it now because of this catalyst. The animation of consuming your grenade for the Giga Shot does take a while, long enough that I don't think it is something you should be doing as a reaction to something. I would just load a grenade and then have it ready and then react to a situation that's happening. I'm sure there's some kind of build you could make with this that has it really pop off though. Lots of grenade, lots of big shots. But honestly, the main limiting factor is just how slow it is to shove a grenade into this thing. You can give me all the grenades in the world, it just gets a little cumbersome. Cerberus +1 has had a catalyst, which I imagine many people at least own, but the function of the catalyst has changed to the following. After a kill, hold reload to bop your weapon and give yourself a 7-second focused fire buff, which refreshes automatically on kill. This tightens the spread of the shots on Cerberus and gives the weapon a 50% damage boost. Essentially, this is kill clip at 50%, which automatically refreshes on kill. No reload needed. Sounds pretty good, right? I was actually a little underwhelmed. This buff does not make the gun into an auto-win weapon in PvE because its range is still somewhat limited. It's always been an auto rifle with below average effective range for an auto rifle because of the extra barrels on the gun, and even with the tightened spread, you still need to play in its somewhat normal range for it to be at its most effective. Shocker. The range that I'd want to be playing in with this weapon is maybe closer to like max distance SMG range and like a little beyond that. In lower tier content, obviously this is just going to absolutely shred through enemies, but I found it a bit lacking still, even in something like Expert Battlegrounds Echoes. Sure, red bar enemies were falling over pretty easily, but even things like orange bar captains were still resilient against the damage with the buff active, and there was enough incoming damage that I never felt super comfortable just holding down the trigger in the range where I feel like I needed to do it. I did also find myself holding reload somewhat often, expecting an animation to play that just never came due to my teammates ending up getting the kill. Some sort of assist-driven access like 1 kill or 3 to 5 assists might help reduce that pain point. It also isn't going to be chunking some higher difficulty enemies in the way that you might imagine. Yes, it's a 50% damage boost, but the thing is still an auto rifle at the end of the day. You're not going to be beast moding down champions or anything like that, at least anything above seasonal content, episodic content, difficulty, whatever. Also, swapping weapons with the Cerberus buff active, the focused fire buff, will get rid of it, so you can't swap. It also has incredibly fierce competition in the auto rifle world in Kvostov, Necrochasm, and even Quicksilver Storm, even in its nerfed state. And I'm not sure Cerberus is gonna be taking over any of those weapons just yet. All of the other weapons have one thing that Cerberus doesn't, and that's AoE potential. But even then, its raw damage output just didn't feel as good to me in higher difficulty stuff. It's definitely better, but I'm still leaning towards the other exotic auto rifles. Speaking of Necrochasm, if you pay attention to my shorts page, you might have seen a clip of me using it recently. Necrochasm has always been a pretty good weapon, and now it's even better. Reload speed after precision kills, the burn from the Thrall explosion lasts longer, and the Catalyst is a giga version of One for All, which I think is one of the strongest weapon perks in the entire game. Needless to say, Necrochasm is absolutely something you should consider using nowadays. It has always been something to consider, but now even more so. Fast reloads, big explosions, Catalyst is really good. There is little not to love with this thing. I know people like to complain about it not proccing the Cursed Thrall explosion on any kill versus precision only, and to those people I say, just hit your crits, lol. It does not need that function, it is strong enough as is, and if Cursed Thrall explosions were going off on every single kill, not just crits, I'm sorry, that would be too much, given how good the Cursed Thrall explosion is. Staying in primary weapon world, Dead Man's Tale used to be the talk of the town in season, what was it, 12, 13, something like that, and now it's just not. First off, if you don't have the catalyst for this thing, I don't know if I'm even bothering using it in the first place. The Catalyst, while hip firing, got some changes, some reduced accuracy benefits. I'm not really sure why that. I guess maybe more of a PvP thing. Increased rate of fire, 15% bonus damage when at 5 stacks of Cranial Spike, on top of Cranial Spike having more reload and stability with it. Unfortunately, this did not move the needle at all, at least for me. When having to shoot at anything other than a red bar enemy, it is a chore at best in higher difficulty stuff, mid-tier stuff. I still frequently found myself in a position where I would never have enough shots loaded. I would just stop my reloads halfway through. Having to shoot against anything with a shield is a nightmare, and I wouldn't recommend it. However, Tex Mechanica Scouts are getting a buff, a hefty one, sometime in August. 30% more damage in PvE, and I'm assuming that includes Dead Man's Tale because it's a Tex Scout. So, when that rolls around, maybe there's something there. I would be surprised if I had renewed interest in the weapon even with the buff. Maybe I will. I don't know. I'm open to it. But in its current form, for PvE purposes, I think you can shelve this unless you really enjoy the hipfire fantasy or just really like scout rifles, and will reevaluate after the buffs. Or as I know it, if it's not good enough for a video, I'm probably not going to talk about it too much. Next up, we have Deterministic Chaos, which is the void machine gun that was earnable in Lightfall that everyone promptly forgot even existed in the first place. Bungie has changed when Weaken and Volatile trigger. Volatile now triggers every 4th shot, while Weaken triggers on every 16th, which is probably how it should have been in the first place. Does this do anything to revitalize my desire to use this weapon? Absolutely not. And there are 2 reasons why. Number 1, Commemoration. Number 2, Hammerhead. Both of these are top of their class legendary void machine guns with excellent perks designed for slaying out as much as possible. Not only that, but if you're the kind of person who wants to mess around with Volatile to a heavy degree, you're probably doing it on a Hunter who can make Volatile happen pretty easily if you spec for it. Also, the magazine size is abysmal at a paltry 48 shots. I felt like I was reloading more than I was playing half the time. The weapon does have built-in anti-barrier, which is still probably the best thing about it in case you need that, but I still see very little reason to engage with this weapon in its current state, especially if you have Commemoration or Hammerhead and it's a good roll. The only time I would is if you are desperately in need of a weaken effect and you're willing to sacrifice most of your damage for it. But in that case, like, why not just use Divinity? Bump up its magazine to 64 at a minimum. Honestly, probably even more than that. And then I would buff this, like, even more if you want it to stand a remote chance against Commemoration or Hammerhead. The Colony, aka the Insectoid Launching Grenade Launcher, got a buff where if you kill with a shot of the Colony, it will spawn another robot that will seek out another target, scaling depending on the difficulty of the target, up to 5 robots. However, this effect does not chain for very long. 1 kill on an enemy will produce 1 Insectoid robot. That spawned robot will not trigger another spawn. Now, if you were able to chain it like that, you could basically fire off a small handful of colony shots at the start of an encounter, and it would probably just endlessly generate robots, hunting down everything in sight endlessly until it was all gone. And, you know, that's pretty cool, but maybe it's not the most balanced thing in the world. A direct hit with the Colony does a bit less damage than a direct hit from something like Edge Transit, but the entire point of the Colony is to not really have to aim super hard and let the bugs do all the work for you. It does okay in content where there's a lot of enemies that tend to get bunched up, but if you just aimed a regular grenade launcher at that same group of enemies, you'd probably get a very similar effect without having to use your exotic slot. Also, sometimes the extra robot that spawns will just explode instantly and not do anything. It's a fun novelty, I guess, but it's not doing anything to really get me excited about using it in the slightest, and I think it's another skip. I either want more bugs on the battlefield or I just want more value for the times where, like, 1 bug only gets to kill 1 dreg or something like that, because that's just a waste of your ammo. Symmetry got a small reload buff, and it got eddy current built into the weapon, or the catalyst, one of the two, but nothing else got changed about the weapon, so there's not really a whole lot to review. I do think the weapon is somewhat balanced. I mean, it's underpowered, obviously, because like nobody's using it. They could maybe make it easier to get the revolution rounds or something, or bump up the damage. I'd be okay with that. But it's a little similar to Final Warning in that you need to enjoy using the weapon's function for you to want to use it, unless it happened to be like the best thing in the game, which it's not. But it is one of my favorite exotics that I don't use. So hopefully one day Symmetry gets a little sunshine. Truth has 3 rockets in the chamber now, and it also finally deals impact damage, which is a nice damage boost. It previously wasn't doing impact damage, which is a somewhat significant part of a rocket's damage, because it had a perk that made it so the rocket exploded before it actually hit the target, which was great for PvE, but it made it nearly irrelevant in PvE. I mean, basically irrelevant. And yet, Truth has not seen any new attention because there hasn't really been an encounter introduced that demands you use Truth over the God Roll rockets you might already have. Now, if you have no good rockets to your name, then sure, Truth is a worthy selection if you need rocket-based damage, especially on a target that moves around a lot, thinking potentially the final boss of Ghost of the Deep type stuff. There's also probably something that you can do with Hazardous Propulsion, which is the new Titan exotic. Otherwise, it's probably not really worth the exotic slot. It's fine, but you can optimize more. Bastion is something that actually surprised me quite a lot. Maybe not to the point where I'm maining Bastion, but it did impress. It now has a lot of synergy with a melee-based setup. Melee attacks give you a buff that lets you charge Bastion faster, and it deals more damage, 45% more damage, while hitting a mostly accurate Bastion shot boosts your melee damage by 100% for a brief time. So the combo here is melee attack to juice up Bastion, and then shoot Bastion, and then follow up with a big melee attack, and then you go from there. It's basically if Bungie put 1-2 punch on a fusion rifle. I don't think this replaces 1-2 punch in any sort of melee setups, like if you have a shotgun already that you're using, but it's neat to see this kind of perk spread to other weapon types. A lot of things aren't even going to survive this combo of attack outside of legend tier or higher champions and bosses, expert tier, whatever they're calling it now, and bosses, stuff like that. And that's just in its purest form, like no Syntheseps, no Liar's Handshake, any other buffs, anything like that. I think it's probably a bit more manageable to just melee attack to proc the boosted Bastion stuff and then just shoot some Bastion at a target. There's nothing wrong with trying to combo melee, Bastion, melee, especially if you have 3 melee charges, but once you burn through all of that, you're going to need a way to get back all of those melee charges, although it does work with your uncharged melee. Maybe some Transcendence peppered in there as well could really help you. Liar's Handshake Hunters might be able to make something happen here, or Syntheseps Hunters, whatever you're using, since your melees are naturally much harder hitting and nearly infinitely replenishable, so you don't really need to worry about having a charge ready to go. But a Liar's Handshake melee also already hits like a truck and can bop master tier champions on its own, so you might not even need Bastion in the first place. Regardless, though, there's something here to mess around with. It might not be a super meta build or anything too revolutionary, but uncharged melee into a Bastion shot, into a charged melee with like Syntheseps proc or something like that, it can give some big damage. Bastion itself already hits pretty hard for a fusion too, so, you know, maybe break this thing out of the vault. How long has it been? It's been like 15 seasons since you even tried this, right? Maybe give it a try, see what's up for yourself. Ariana's Vow, once the undisputed anti-barrier weapon, has had a big fall from grace. And Bungie is trying to change that by adding ignitions to whenever you break shields, solar or barrier specifically. Okay, they also made it 2-shot pretty much any barrier shield in the game. The ignition deals more damage compared to the damage of a headshot from Ariana's Vow with first glance active. So you're basically getting an extra shot of damage for free after breaking a shield. Now, to me, is that really enough to move the needle? I don't think so. I know the big piece of feedback that people have given for Ariana's Vow is just let it one-shot barrier shields, and I think I understand why Bungie didn't make it do that. If you look at Arbalest, yes, it breaks in one shot, but it has a lower amount of total reserves, it takes longer to shoot, and is quite literally the shield break exotic. So it makes sense that Ariana's Vow takes at least 2 shots. But then you might counter with Wish Ender and the fact that it breaks in 1 shot as well, and it's a primary. And I don't have the greatest reply to that other than it also needs some kind of charge up, wind up, knocking of the arrow, similar to Arbalest. So it's not like an instant thing that you can do. Also, with Radiant being as ubiquitous as it is, you don't really need something like Ariana's Vow to be your big shield breaker. That was part of its appeal back then, getting around the restrictions of the artifact and what weapons you could actually use to break shields. Now, that's a lot easier to do, and we're also much stronger, so we can deal with barrier champions a lot better now. There's also the small chance that you don't even get the ignition, because if you have multiple anti-barrier weapons on your team, if you shoot first, the odds are pretty decent that you won't be able to shoot fast enough in order to break the shield, thus missing out on the ignition completely. That is easily managed, though, by just shooting a little bit later or after your teammates start shooting, but it's still something extra you gotta think about. That is most of what I wanted to hit, or at least actually cared about hitting. A lot of talk for Necrochasm good, Bastion is neat, everything else kind of whatever, but that's YouTube, baby. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.